Welcome to the third student takeover with Fresh Meat. We've got India and Anoushka. Would you both like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Anoushka and I studied illustration at Edinburgh University. And then once I graduated, I went on to work in advertising with India. We both studied illustration and worked in advertising together for a while. And then we set up Fresh Meat together. I think Preet's very handily put a little introduction to us in the chat as well. Yeah, we studied, and I doing my master's part-time as well, in media communications and development.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically the same. Studied illustration, went to work in advertising. I'm not doing a master's part-time. Don't have time for that. Yeah, we've known each other for a few years now.
It's been a while.
There are more people on the Fresh Meat team, but neither of them studied specifically illustration, so we thought we'd keep this just to us. But there's also Curtis and Charlotte who say hi to them as well if you ever meet them. Lovely people.
Nice. I suppose, I guess we could start with maybe going right back to the beginning. Why did you both choose illustration?
In England you do A levels before you choose what you want to do at uni. Mm-hmm. And I really loved art, and I really hated my art teacher. And she just a bit of a killjoy, bit of a non-experimentation. Let's just do it like the textbook says it's meant to be done. And so I didn't do an art A level. I did maths, computer science, mechanics, and English literature, which was so dull and taught me that actually I did want to do something creative. So I did a foundation after that, and in foundation they described illustration as the midway point between fine art and painting and graphic design, and I was like, that sounds great, I'll give that a go. What about you, Nish?
I realised how similar our even before we met was, because I went to school in Ireland and had a similar thing. Art was really not focused on, and we don't have 4 A levels. You do like 10 subjects at the end, so you don't really focus on anything specific. And I was always quite creative, but I had no idea what I wanted to do, and no one in my school had any idea about the creative industry. So I went to Glasgow and I did a foundation course in Glasgow, and I think that kind of led me similarly to find illustration, which was also kind of a halfway. Like I didn't just want to do fine art, I wanted to do something a bit more technical. Yeah, and illustration was definitely that for me.
Yeah, lovely. So you both did, India, did you say 4 years of illustration at Edinburgh?
It was a 4-year course. I joined into the second year because I already had a foundation, but Anoushka did the full 4 years as well.
So could you tell us a bit about your kind of journey from graduating into where you are at the minute? Anoushka, you're at Gravity Road now, and India, you're at Vayner Media.
It's an American company. So, yeah, you guys know D&AD, the design organisation. We both went to D&AD New Blood after our graduate show, which was maybe about 2 weeks after our exhibition. And at the time it was in person. I know it's not in person last year and this year, but it was an exhibition in a hall in Shoreditch in London, with maybe 100 unis all showing up and pitching their best students' work. And I got a job just after that, a place that I did some freelance work for, and then they were like, our designer's actually not coming back from her holiday, can you stay? So I went straight into work. And Anoushka, you freelanced for a bit.
Yeah, I freelanced and did kind of a couple of exhibitions that I got through D&AD as well, and then wasn't really sure and ended up freelancing for the same company that India was working in. And then yeah, was hired full-time there as well. So that's how I found my way into advertising too.
Do you do a lot of creative work outside of your jobs or your roles?
Yes and no. I have a list of creative work that I want to do, and I have the tools to do it, and I never find the time to do it. I bought a risograph printer when I moved to London, and I like criminally use it maybe once every 3 months, which is just awful. And I'm constantly printing stuff for my friends just so that I feel like I've gotten use out of it. But then at the same time, I do freelance work in my spare time now. So it's sort of, yeah, that's not really an answer. Like, do I do my own work in my spare time?
Yeah,
No.
just like personal projects.
Yeah, I don't really do that. Noosh is one for absolutely any project. I think you're painting some tables at the moment, aren't you?
I was painting some chairs. Notoriously bad for starting personal projects though and leaving them half finished. But yeah, I did some album artwork for a friend, and I definitely pick up little bits that I still really love to do, and I'll find some time, even if it's kind of at 1 a.m. do them sometimes.
Do you do kind of more illustrative things, or do you find that like it's more kind of wide ranging now? I don't know, do you do bits of photography or bits of graphic design and that kind of thing?
It's pretty wide for me, I think. Although when I really do personal projects that are just for me, then it almost always goes back to being illustration, I think, because I get so little time to do it in all of the other things that we do, like through Fresh Meat and at work. We do some illustration, but not just like sitting down and drawing something. So I'll definitely kind of go back to it then. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely I will choose personal projects because it's something I feel like I haven't done in a while, whether it's printmaking or drawing, because I'm working on a particularly like type heavy design thing at work. I might then do some like painting in my spare time because I'm like, I need to balance this out with something. But there's no real like, oh, I only do this or I only do this. Which I think sort of defined our uni as well. Like a lot of people leave an illustration degree and they're like, oh, I do black and white ink drawings and that's my thing and I've got my style and I'm nailing it. And that's great when you find your niche and you really nail it. But I didn't do that. I liked experimenting. I liked trying everything.
Do you feel like you after leaving uni you're both more kind of generalists than specialists?
Yeah, you could say that.
But I think that works well. It's kind of well suited to advertising because you do play with a lot of styles and you need to answer briefs that come from a lot of different creative perspectives. So if you work well like that, then advertising is quite a good one to go into. Not to say that we don't have, I think you can still recognize my work and India's work when you see it. But it often has lots of different influences.
Yeah, I think if I spend the morning working on UNICEF and I spend the afternoon working on NatWest, I can't have my own style because then their ads would look the same and they can't because they're different brands. And if you know me, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a design that India's done. Classic layout that India loves, or whatever. But yeah, there's no like one trait through all of it.
Do you both have any tips that you could offer like students who are just, you don't have a specialism of like black and white fine drawing, you've got like 4 or 5 different clients with different illustration styles?
Yeah.
If you're trying to adapt, or I suppose there are times when you're working on your project and you know what you want it to look like, but it's not something that I do a lot of my time. So I'm like, there's almost like a warm up, like you're warming up for a sport or something where you're trying to get into it and you're trying to work out fundamentally what it is you're trying to achieve with it. Do I have any tips for knowing how to do that? No? Practice?
Yeah, practice. Get good at recognizing what things are really distinctive of a specific style, I guess. Like if you can kind of start training your eye to see, well, what is it about this illustration style that makes it consistent across these different projects or just different people? Like it's always got some use of texture and some use of fine line, or I guess when you start being quite quick at seeing that, then you can start to apply it to your own work quite quickly as well.
A lot of the time we're also suggesting how designs should be made for a project, so don't suggest something that you cannot do. And a way around that potentially.
We've got a question in the chat. How did you both end up in the advertising industry then?
My cousin worked in advertising and I did some work experience when I was like 14, far too young to be of any use to anyone in an office, but decided that it was pretty cool from there. And I think I just sort of was aware of it as an industry whilst I finished my degree, which was useful, rather than finishing my degree and being like, what is out there?
Yeah. And then I think because India was working in it, I saw in the year that I had in between when I was freelancing, and I was doing kind of different freelance bits, like I was doing some branding and some just pure illustration, and it was quite varied, and I really liked the stuff that India was working on. So I guess I pushed it in that direction more. And then, I mean, you were very good at giving me advice on how my portfolio should be to get into advertising. So
yeah,
it helps. You know.
I feel like if you want your portfolio to work for advertising, you just need to show a use for it. A lot of what we did in our illustration degrees, and this is not true for all illustration and design degrees, but a lot of it was kind of just pretty, and it was well made, and it was well balanced, the contrast, the colours, the type was nice, but there was no real purpose for it. And I think with my first portfolio, when I tried to get into advertising, like looking back at it now, I'd just be like, but what's the point? Like, I've shown that I can draw, but I haven't shown that I understand how to craft a message, how to give it a purpose, and what this design would be used for in the real world.
Kind of like touching back on illustrative styles, I wanted to ask you both, how was the journey of finding your own illustrative style? Because that's kind of something that people struggle a lot with at the beginning.
I think I struggled with it a lot. And I think it was such a big question at university, like, do you know, what's your style, and have you found it yet? And I think your style comes, like, just keep doing what you love. Don't try too hard to find it. Like, if you're interested, and it can change a lot, you know, like my work has changed massively, even in the last like year. I don't have a definitive style. And I think, like we were saying before, there are lots of areas in the creative industries where that suits you really well. So just keep creating projects that you really love, and try and, you know, challenge yourself, but don't be too dead set on finding a specific style, because you might end up pigeonholing yourself as well. You know, if you're really like, I will now only do this, then that it doesn't always work out for the best.
Yeah, you have to be versatile as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
I also think a lot of people don't recognize that they have a style, and I know this particularly in my last year at university. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, everything that I produce looks massively different, and my people in the studio, and Anoushka included, were like, no, it doesn't. They were like, that's clearly your work. And I was like, yeah, but this bit that I made and this bit that I made are like so different. And they were like, no, they're not like that different. Like, there's a way that I approach poses that is standard throughout my work, and there's a way that I sort of do faces that is standard throughout my work. And it was actually like people pointing that out, that I was like, oh yeah, I do that. And maybe if I just keep doing that and know that I am like making conscious effort to do that, it will become more pronounced. And I think if you're not sure if you've got a style or not, if you put everyone in your courses, like if everyone did an A3 print and you put it into a pile and everyone had to guess whose was whose, you would know whose was whose pretty easily, even if no one had like a dead set style. So you're probably closer than you think, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you maybe just aren't aware of it.
Yeah, that's true. I think like a lot of times you just get tunnel vision with your own work. You just don't realize what you have until.
Yeah.
We also have a question in the chat. How do you balance your work life with being a freelancer?
It's been easier in a pandemic because there is no one goes outside anymore. I mean, the advertising industry in particular has a very unhealthy relationship with the amount of work that it asks people to do, and it's getting better, but it's something to be aware of if you're joining the industry. And maybe it's not just advertising, maybe it is the entire creative industry is not particularly good with the 9 till 5. It's more like an 8 till 6 and sometimes midnight on maybe the weekend too. But my work is pretty good at the moment. They're like, let's not work past 6. You know, everyone's mental health has taken a dip at the moment because of the pandemic. Let's not add extra work to that, which is really nice. How do I personally balance freelance projects? I probably take on too many projects. I am quite frank with deadlines. I will tell people, you know, they'll want it by the end of the week, and I will say this will be done when it's done, and that might be by the end of the month. It could be by the end of this week, but I will not fill you with hope for it. So just being sort of honest with that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think being honest with people. Also, if you have set a deadline and you can't make it, try and tell people as early as possible. Don't kid yourself into thinking that you'll be able to do it last minute. No one needs that stress, you know. Like, I think people are much more receptive to you just saying, I actually need a few more days. Especially if it's kind of side projects and freelance work. They might not be as receptive if it's a big client and they've got a lot of money behind it. But yeah, drink lots of tea, do fun things. Don't.
Great advice.
Life isn't all work.
Yeah, make sure your timetable isn't just freelance work or this work or that work. Make sure there are other things in there that you want to do.
Yeah, you will have plenty of time to work on projects. You know, I think I keep thinking this, but I'm always like, I have no time. I'm getting older. I must do everything immediately, and that feeling doesn't go away. So I think try and let it go. You know, so I think just give yourself a break. You'll get around to doing the things that you want to do.
Thank you. That was great advice.
We've got a couple of more questions in the chat actually. Is there anything about the advertising industry that you wish you knew when you were getting started?
There's a lot of pros and cons to working in advertising. It's a fast-moving industry, which I like. It has a legacy of not being very nice, sort of perpetuated by TV programs like Mad Men, where like there is a legacy of sexism, I'm not gonna lie, and there is a legacy of burnout. It is a lot better than it used to be. It's not perfect, but I don't think there's any industry in the UK that you could say women are treated equally and we've got absolute diversity and everything's fine. It's definitely not the poster child for pretending to be that either, but it is better than it used to be.
We've actually got another question as well. I can relate about the art style in my artwork. How about the financial income with artwork in real life to support yourself?
It takes time, and I think, you know, doing what you really love and being an artist or an illustrator can be really financially difficult. I think it's important to know that if you have a part-time job or you're doing other stuff on the side, that doesn't make you not an illustrator or an artist. It really, like, you still are, and that's it. You know, you can be an illustrator or an artist and still work in a cafe. Those two things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, there's very few illustrators who I think go straight into full-time work, and I'm now a full-time illustrator. So, I think when we graduated, some of our peers were like, oh, I had to get a job that was like not illustration, but I'm still doing illustration. And that is 100% normal, absolutely fine. Nothing to be ashamed of. People just don't talk about it because they think there's something to be ashamed of. It's just learning the ropes.
And actually, speaking of freelancing, have you got how do you guys go about getting new work? Do you do a lot of social media stuff, or you got a big network of friends that you kind of people need stuff?
Yeah, my freelance work comes through colleagues that I have worked with at old agencies or old projects most of the time. I think the more it sort of snowballs when you first get into the industry, people are like, oh, you're a designer, I'll note that down. And then like after 2 or 3 years, they're like, I need you for my wedding invites, which is probably fun, but not the most interesting project in the world. And then but it does sort of snowball from there. So now I'm doing branding projects as my freelance work, which is more fun.
Yeah, I think it's knowing people. So I think rather than social media, yeah, I think it's networking is really important, and trying to meet as many people as possible, or just talk to people. Just put yourself out there and say, I'm a designer if you're looking for anyone. You know, it's hard, but it does end up working, and it takes a while to build up a group of people who will hire you for freelance. But once you get rolling, people will come back to you because they trust you, you know, and if you can work well to deadlines and you're professional in the way that you deal with people, then people will come back.
Oh, Pretty, do you want to go?
Yeah, we have a few questions in the chat. Yomi is asking if you know any software that is resourceful to help with your artwork.
In the advertising industry, Adobe is pretty much standard, which we talked a bit about at the UCA talk. Last week. But yeah, it's annoying that Adobe is standard because it's expensive if you need to learn it before you get a job. But once you get a job, they'll pay for it for you, so it's then free.
Yeah, so I think we were speaking about this before, that if you can get a free trial to Adobe and get some basic skills under your belt, like there are lots of online kind of free courses and stuff. If you could just know how to do at least the basics with that, then I think that will really stand you in good stead when it comes to like actually applying for jobs. And then in the meantime, there are other softwares you can use that do very similar things and are pretty transferable. I think, what were the ones that you mentioned last week?
Figma's pretty good if you just want graphic design and maybe UX and UI. One that I see people talking about a lot, and maybe you guys have an opinion on this too, is Procreate is obviously massive and has had such a surge in the last 2 years in terms of illustrators using it. But I'm yet to see any agencies that are like, we need someone who knows how to use Procreate, and when you get this job, we'll give you an iPad to do it on. Like, people still they love the work that's made on Procreate, but they employ people who don't make work and don't have Procreate. So yeah, maybe you guys have got an opinion on that, but it's just something interesting I've noticed.
I guess something like really recent, and I feel like Adobe has such a big monopoly in the design industry that it's always going to still be the standard. I feel like it's going to take years for us to get to a point where like other softwares like Canva, Figma, and Procreate trying to like overcome that a little bit, because like those are a bit more accessible, at least to affordability wise, at least.
Yeah, definitely. I also worry about the sort of flexibility with Procreate. Like, if I make something in Photoshop at the moment and I need it to move, I can then put it into another Adobe program, and I can put it into a vector Adobe program, or I can put it into a printing Adobe program like InDesign, which you need for sort of the professional uses, I guess.
Yeah, you can send a Procreate file to Photoshop, and it comes up as a layered file.
Yeah,
you can also animate in it. So it's pretty transferable professionally only in the last like year. But I've realized that was a gap. And
Photoshop have brought out their Photoshop for tablets now. So we'll see how that goes, but you still need to pay the full price. I'm not really sure what they're targeting that at when Procreate is so much cheaper.
Illustrator on iPad is really great, actually.
Is it?
I've tried it a few times, like, because you can do it with a pen and it's really intuitive.
Yeah, because Illustrator is not intuitive, otherwise it's a bit
absolutely not. We have another question in the chat. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get into illustration with no previous academic background?
You don't need a degree to do illustration, but what a degree can give you is time to commit to learning how you want to be an illustrator. But if you can commit yourself to that time without the degree, and learning, there's a lot of resources online now where you could try to learn that, I think that's fine. There's also D&AD Shift, which is a night school for people who haven't got degrees, who want to get into the creative industries, which is really good. I don't know whether the applications have closed. I feel like they maybe closed last week, and I'm really giving you bad advice now. You're going to have to wait a year to implement it, but look out for that one.
Yeah, I think you can build a portfolio without a degree. It takes a lot of time to develop style, but if that's something that, like India said, if you can be self-guided and do that, then you definitely can get into it. And I don't think like companies look, especially in the creative industries, it's much less of a thing. Like, they don't really look at your grades, they look at your portfolio, So it's definitely an option.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever once asked me what my grade was.
Never. Yeah, I feel like since like day one of like any creative degree, you always taught that the portfolio is what matters the most. Like I remember like putting my grades in my CV when I was applying for placement, like no one even looked over it.
Yeah.
No questions about any modules or anything, just portfolio. That was it.
Yeah. If they like your work and they think you can work quickly and well within that environment, then there's no need for you to have good grades. You know,
Agreed.
not that I'm saying don't get good grades, you know, still study.
There are benefits to degree design, but they're not necessary. They're not strictly necessary.
What do you do if you struggle to be inspired for your work, whether that's outside of you, outside of your job or when you're in work?
I've never had it in work where I'm uninspired, but I think that's because there's a whole department, if not two departments, who have to write the brief before it comes to the designer. So if it got to me and I didn't know what to do with it, that would not be good. There'd be like 5 people who'd wasted 2 weeks. So that doesn't happen, thankfully. They're good at their jobs. But there are sort of, you know, art block moments outside of work where you're like, I want to make something. You know, it doesn't need a purpose because this isn't for work. This is just for me, but I don't know what I want to make. Yeah, I think being creative and having creative block is so linked to your mental well-being and how you feel about your work and if you feel like working. I think if you're struggling to be inspired, it might be a sign of how you're feeling motivated generally, rather than just thinking that it's only about your work.
Do something different, you know, like go and talk to your friends, or go have a coffee, or try a new sport, or join a random group. I don't know, you know, there are lots of things that you can do that might suddenly inspire you and you had no idea they even existed. So
I've also had it before where I want to do so many things that when I try to sit down and make them into one project, it's just a mess. Like, I really want to do this UX project, but then there's also this theme that I'm really interested in, and I haven't used watercolors in ages, so I really want to do that. And it just doesn't work together. Like if you try and mash those 3 things together, probably not going to look the best. It's maybe just like simplifying what you're trying to do and making that work.
As you both know, with uni, it's just like it's deadline, and you know, year-long projects. So yeah, I'm sure Pretty's the same. We're getting to the end of the year now, and it's just a bit like just ready for the summer, ready for some just maybe a little bit different, you know.
I feel you. I'm studying too, so I suddenly remember that feeling that I haven't had for 3 years. Not the best, but we'll get through it.
We have another question in the chat. Do you ask for feedback for your artwork from your work colleagues?
I have to have feedback from my colleagues. It's a team project. It's not my project. It's an agency piece of work. So wherever you work, you will have feedback. Even if you're a freelance illustrator, your client will give you feedback. So yeah. How many times, I see the other half of the question says how many times that you redesign your work. Depends how well your idea goes down. Sometimes not at all. Sometimes 400 times.
Yeah, it depends on the client too. Also, very often you'll give 3, you know, maybe 2 or 3 different visual options. So from the beginning, they kind of decide what style they like, and then you hone that in, and then they give you another round of feedback. And it completely, like India says, it completely depends on the, you know, on the client. But you can have anywhere from 1 to 15 rounds of feedback. But the more rounds of feedback you get, the more it costs the company. So they try to limit it.
And if you're freelancing, you can put that into your contract as well. Like, you know, this is what you're paying for, and within that you can have 3 major changes. But if you want more than that, we will bill you again.
Yes, I think that's really important to know as a freelancer. Put in the amount of rounds of amends that you're willing to give, and within what time frame, and also figure out how to charge for overtime if you are going to go freelance, and make sure that's all written into your contract from the very beginning, because that's something I didn't do, and it kind of came back to bite me a little bit at the start. So and it's not asking for too much, it just looks professional.
Mhm.
I know with
Did you?
oh sorry.
Oh, go on. No, just go.
It just with I know with major changes it's kind of like setting the brief, but how do you both handle, like, you know, when clients kind of say, I just want a little bit here, I just want a little bit there?
Like, is it ever a little bit? Like, if they're like, oh well, you know, that yellow could just be a bit warmer, you're like, well, yeah, but if that yellow's warmer, then maybe that red needs to be cooler to balance that. And if this yellow's warmer, then that picture doesn't fit anymore because that's already quite yellow and it would blend in too much. So I think it's about teaching your clients that actually small changes aren't easy. That doesn't mean they're easy just because it's small, and it doesn't mean it doesn't impact other things just because it's small.
And do explain that to people. Like, it's okay to explain that if someone's asking for something. Often people who are hiring you for these things don't understand the creative process, and so if you can be really clear from the beginning, like, actually this is a much bigger task, so that will fall into a second round of amends, or, you know, just be clear with what you're doing.
And if it is
people don't know
change, if it is a small change, you can be like, yes, sure, and I won't charge you for this. And then they'll be like, oh, she's not charging me for this. I love this girl.
We've got another question in the chat actually. Do you have a time schedule with your work?
In work, yes, it's very rigorously scheduled. I think especially in advertising, they're very tight deadlines. So you know, you could be turning around a project in 2 or 3 days, which is very short. It's usually kind of a week or so. But it means that, and because you're working with different groups of people as well, you have to have your section done. So you're allocated a certain amount of time. And you usually have like a schedule of what you'll be doing for the next kind of 2 weeks or so. Sometimes months, depends on the project you're working on.
Yeah, I've got a lovely resource manager at my work who timetables the entire creative department by hour, which is not a small job when you've got 30 full-time creative staff and maybe nearly as many freelancers. But we, as an agency, bill our time to our clients hourly, so everything is very much scheduled. And you have to keep to that schedule because, you know, I might be showing my work that I've spent the day on to my boss, and if she's got 4 meetings that afternoon, I can't be like, let's move this back by an hour because she's got another meeting. There are schedules that need to be followed, definitely. With freelance work, it's a bit more, I mean, my personal experience with freelance work, it's a bit more flexible, but that's because if I'm doing freelance work, I'm telling people I have a full-time job. If I'm doing this for you in my own hours, so we won't be catching up in a 9 till 5. I will be doing other work. So it's more a schedule that I create, but that's my personal experience with freelance, and everyone's freelance experience is different.
Although I think you do tend to be able to set your own time scale in freelance, and do give yourself enough time, like give yourself enough time to make amends and to rework things and to allow that creative process to happen as well. I mean, obviously you can't ask for weeks and weeks, but yeah. It's good to plan and give yourself a little bit of a schedule. I think that's very helpful.
And if your freelance client says, I need this and I've got 2 weeks, then it's your job as the illustrator to be, or the graphic designer or whatever, to say within 2 weeks you can have this, and it's a simplified version of what I normally offer because you have put the time constraint on it. And that's what the onus is on you there to be like, this will not be a detailed deliverable because you have put that cap on it. So that iconic triangle that's like, you can have it quick, or you can have it good, or you can have it cheap. You cannot have all 3, you can only have 2.
So true. That works within advertising too, though. I think if a client comes with a really tight deadline, and you need to say, you know, this is the kind of design I can offer within that time schedule, and that's it.
Kind of touching back on that like freelance point, making sure that you get paid for overtime. How do you make sure that happens? Like, do you charge per hour, per day, per project? How does that work?
Well, since I did it, I do have it somewhere in the more recent freelance contract. I think I did it per hour, but it was because of the clients I was working with. I know you can you mean you can do it per day, or per half day. And I think I just charged, it wasn't substantially more, but slightly more per hour once I ran into that overtime. And then I also had like this is my limit of overtime. I will not work more than this in a week, you know. Because
you can have your day rate, and then you can say your like weekend day rate or your evening rate. And if you want to say that that's double because you value your weekends, that is up to you. And if they are on a tight deadline and they need you to work the weekend, they probably will try and find the budget for it. I charge a day rate for my freelance stuff, and the client I'm working with at the moment is really good actually. So I've sort of told him I have a full-time job. I won't be working on this in the daytime technically, but if I do 4 hours one evening and 4 hours the next evening, I will tell you that that's an 8-hour day, and I'll charge you my day rate even though it wasn't one day. So I think that's a good way to sort of be flexible with it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another question in the chat is, what did you put into your creative CV? And once you had your interview or you submitted your CV to a position, did you ask them to keep your CV for a future opportunity? I didn't apply for the job that I'm in at the moment. I was recruited. You get a lot of recruitment in the creative industries. So I don't think they ever actually saw my CV before they hired me. I just told them about myself. But in terms of freelance, I think CV and portfolio, you would send it to the resource manager or the agent or whoever the contact is and say, let me know when you've got work, in which case they would keep a copy of it. And I think that would be expected. We were giving a talk at UCA. I was at Katie Streeter, said that she sends her portfolio to, oh yeah, hello. She sends her portfolio to art directors and they'll get back like 6 months later. So they've clearly kept the portfolio. So I would expect it to be kept. Hello.
Yeah, I think I did mention that, especially if I was reaching out to companies that didn't necessarily have job roles going, but that I was just interested in working with. Like, you just send your CV and your portfolio and you say, if you do at any point have an opportunity or you are giving internships, please bear me in mind. In terms of what I had in my CV, I think creative CVs are a lot shorter, generally. I tried to keep it to, especially when I was just starting out, to one page, and just be really concise about what your skills are and what your interests are, and it can be quite fun. Don't be afraid of making it fun. It'll make it stand out.
Yeah, I think I've got like the software I can use is on my CV as well. And now that I've had a few jobs in industry, I've started to knock off the stuff on the bottom of the CV. Like, it no longer has any jobs in there because they're not really relevant. And maybe I'd mention it if I was going to work for an agency that had Tesco as one of their clients, maybe I'd say, oh, I used to work in Tesco when I was 16, because it might be relevant, but largely it shouldn't really be there after a few years.
Yeah, kind of like tailor it a little bit to what you're applying to as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Another question is, do you think having a professional website is important within advertising?
Every creative I know has their own website. About 90% of the creatives I know, their website is not up to date, because they're working on other work. They don't have time to update it. I don't think you need it 99% of the time. You only need it when you're looking for a new job. So, I mean, I pay for mine yearly, but maybe that's dumb. Maybe I should pay for it monthly, and then when I get a job, take it down again.
Yeah, I don't have one at the moment, but when I was looking for jobs, I did, and I made sure it was really up to date. And I know that if I'm changing jobs, I will have one again. Yeah, I mean, you do send your portfolio as a PDF to a lot of people as well, rather than as your website. It's also pretty standard. So.
Oh, great! Yeah. Should we do the last couple of questions? Then do you both want to talk about fresh meat?
Yeah, we'll talk about the internship.
So the final few are from Yomi. Do you know someone who's done design towards their own merchandise as a mock-up version?
Well, we use a lot of mock-ups for clients when we're selling work in, because a lot of it is sort of idea based. So like Sam, you showed some examples of this in your talk last week, where you're like, this is a mock-up of what a shelf would look like if you put this in your store, but we're not going to actually build one for you to buy the idea, because that would be a lot of money. So yeah, mock-ups are really widely used in advertising, really widely used.
And what do you do if your clients fail to pay your freelance payroll?
Take small claims.
Yeah, there's I mean, I assume if you're on a freelance contract, then you have a contract. So if they're not paying you, it's in breach of contract. Make sure you read your contract before, of course. But you know, you do have grounds to file a claim if they're not paying you. It's illegal. There are some groups that you can contact who work especially with creatives when these things happen. There's a lack of it for freelancers, and there's a lack of policy for freelancers, which is generally a problem, but being clued up on your own rights is a really good thing to do. And you know, AOI is quite a good resource. They've got quite a lot on the policy and on what your rights are, and I'm going to try and find the other one and I'll drop it in the chat now.
So much with freelancing is changing so quickly at the moment, because they've just brought in IR 35, which I don't personally understand at all, and I will need to learn quite quickly, but I think it means that it will be extremely hard now for them to not pay you. My other tip would be work out who you're asking to pay you, because if you're pestering the art director to pay you for a commission that you did last month, the art director is not actually the one with the credit card. Even if they wanted to pay you today, they probably couldn't. I would find the head of finance or the head of freelance or the resource manager, and they are potentially the ones signing the invoices who would be better to harass. Better for your time, at least, so that you're not wasting time.
Oh yeah, thank you both very much for that, because yeah, I've done a couple of projects on Fiverr, and I know quite a few people that have done like bits and bobs, and normally it's like family, friends and stuff, so you kind of know them and you know they're like going to be decent. But yeah, I didn't realize that. I didn't know about the AOI. Yeah, great.
They're really good. They've got some really good resources.
Oh, smashing. Do you both want to talk about a bit about fresh meat?
I can do a basic intro if Anoushka, you want to get up some of the details of the. So Fresh Meat is a platform for showcasing graduate work, creating links for designers and artists to emerge into the industries, to learn more about the creative industries, to learn more about the options that there are, and for us to sort of put people in touch with people, make links, get people on the ladder. It started a while ago. We were doing some work for TDK, which is the design kids on Instagram. They're really good. We do their London talks, but not really many talks going on in London at the moment because of coronavirus. So I hesitate to say we still do them because we haven't done them in about a year, but hopefully at one point we will get back to doing them. During coronavirus lockdown, the first lockdown, we sort of launched Fresh Meat mostly to launch the Nationwide Degree Show, which was our first major project where we showcased a lot of students' work on billboards around the UK, students whose final year shows had been cancelled by coronavirus. That was our major first project, and we've sort of just been going since there. And Anoushka, maybe you want to talk about our current opportunity.
Yes, we've got an opportunity running at the moment that's providing a paid internship over the summer for emerging talent and for graduates. You don't have to be graduating this year. You can still be studying, or you can have graduated a few years ago. But it's with a really lovely partner organization that we're working with who are called Project Everyone. And they do all of the design work for the United Nations Global Goals, which are goals that the UN set up. There's 17 goals that lots of countries signed off of that are basically aimed at making the world a better place by 2030. And Project Everyone use the power of design, which is really nice, to make them more well known around the world, and to get people to contribute to them and to progress them more quickly. So there are live briefs that you'll be working working on, which is really exciting. And you'll be working directly with their creative director for an entire month. So it's a really good opportunity to get some experience. It's graphic design, but they're quite broad. If you do illustration or you do motion graphics or animation, it's definitely open to you as well. So we're taking, I know you're all really busy. So the way to apply is just, you need to tag us in one piece of work that you have that's related to mental health. And we're going to be choosing 5 submissions to promote over Mental Health Awareness Week. And then one of those people will be chosen to do the internship as well. So if you're interested in that, definitely apply.
And you're just Fresh Meat on Instagram, is it?
Underscore fresh meat.
Underscore fresh meat.
Meat as in meet up, not meat as in animals.
Oh, smashing. Thank you both for coming to the Student Takeover. Thank you very much. Sam, do you want to say a few final things as well?
Yeah, just to say, yeah, thanks very much to all of you, and including James and Pretty again. Thank you for hosting. So yeah, do check out Fresh Meat. They're another fantastic ambassador for emerging creatives. Whether you're at uni, whether you're not, it doesn't matter. Just kind of there's tons of resources out there. And yeah, obviously I know that some of you who have joined today, you're not members of Tern Heads as well, similar kind of thing. Feel free to sign up for free and upload your project work to get some feedback and interact with the rest of the community. And yeah, I just hope you've enjoyed today's takeover. The next one we're planning in hopefully for the 25th of May, which will be with Katie, who's in the room right now, and her friends Connie and Greg, who are all freelance illustrators. So they will be, I think they graduated, or Katie graduated in 2020. Yeah, I think it's just going to be a super fun one. Again, just chatting through how you become a freelancer, how you bill for work, how you price yourself, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, again, do keep an eye out on the Tern Heads mailing list and social media, and I'll be sending out details about that. So yeah, thanks so much everybody for coming, and we will hope to see you on the next one.